What's up, everybody? I picked this up at the junk store earlier since we just happened to be talking about the old maps and California as an island, and especially the big, huge Lake Kabus. But check this out. It's got the constellations. That's the southern constellations. Fire. He's standing on like a Komodo dragon looking thing. Volcanoes going off in the background. And then it's got how the eclipse works. It is showing around Earth, of course, but it is still showing it as geocentric. Then it's got all of the planets orbiting around Earth, which makes up the seven heavens. If you've ever heard that term, it's based off of the seven known planets at that time. And then you've got the stars in the firmament around that. Then the northern constellations, and again with the dragon thingy. Or a winged serpent, sacred catfish, I don't know. Anyway, thought this was pretty cool for $8. So Lake Kabus is how it's listed on quite a few of the maps, and even that 1671 book mentions Lake Kabus. I first saw this a couple years ago. Somebody was doing a video on island of California, and I saw that thing, and I'm like, wait, whoa. I've been there. I drove like 12 hours on a crappy road, and it turns out was only about halfway across this thing. So it instantly hit me where this was. And at this scale, you are talking about a huge body of water, possibly larger than Lake Michigan in volume. And according to these old maps and that book, that lake fed the Great North River, which you can see right here is emptying out into the west coast of the continent, and then there is the Red Sea dividing it between California, according to this map, and many others. So that pretty much has to be the Colorado River. And where that feeds into the Gulf of California is a big U shape, where if they sailed that far up the Gulf and found the Colorado River, well, then they had to have known that California was connected to the mainland. You see what I'm saying? If they sailed all the way to here, they would have found out that it was connected if it was connected. That's the problem here. So last time I talked about this, I had quite a few comments say that so-and-so said that it was over in this other place. So allow me to be thorough here, and I'm going to prove where that thing is. So back at this time, they were really accurate with latitude. Longitude was a little bit more of a problem, but for your latitude, all you had to do is point a sextant to the North Star and fairly easily calculate exactly where you're at. So you go over here to the side of the map, and we're at 40 degrees north latitude with this line. We bring this over, and you can see Lake Kabus is just north of that. So we'll say 41 degrees to 42 to 43 at the top. You check another map, come over, and pretty much the same thing, 41 up to 43. Now, the longitude is trickier because they are using different numbers than we do today. But I'll show you exactly where that is. That is right here between the Unita and Wind River Mountains. Right here are the Wind River Mountains, and you see how they jut out into a peninsula right here. That peninsula even shows up on all of the maps. You see how they've got a mitten shape to them. These appear to be done by different cartographers with different landscape features around, but they all show a peninsula jutting down from the top. I have to wonder if this is something that the cartographer has actually seen, or if they're just going off what the locals told them is up this river, because you have to keep in mind, this is like 1,000 miles up a river. But this area is at 41 to 43 degrees north latitude, just like the maps show. Got the Wind River Mountains jutting down in there, and it just happens to be at the top of the Colorado River. So I think we got a winner here. But just to be for sure, Lake Basin response to tectonic drainage diversion, Eocene Green River Formation. This is some good old bedtime reading here. Continuous exposures of lacustrine and associated alluvial strata west and north of the Rock Springs uplift permit the identification and direct correlation of stratal boundaries between lacustrine facies associations near basin center. This is just a really fancy way of saying we've got the remains of 3 different lake beds here. So here are our Wind River Mountains jutting down right here. And then down at the south end, you've got the Uinta Mountains. And this is a very large area. But they're basically showing the shorelines that started out up here, shrunk down to here, and then the lower Wilson's Peak member. And the south end of this is Gates of Lodore, which I'll show you in a minute. But they've got an uplift there in the center, a thrust going across the top. So they see the tectonic activity there. The question is how gnarly did it get? Now, they say that this was a freshwater lake that went, dried up for a while to an evaporate and then refilled evidently back to a freshwater lake. As far as I know, I don't think that there is a saltwater sea that feeds a river, and this feeds a river. But this is just a couple 100 miles from the Great Salt Lake. You can see it off to the left there, and it's probably a remnant of this. It's part of the evaporates. But let me show you the scale we're talking here. From north to south, it's 136 miles. And then if you go diagonal like it shows on the old maps, it's 250 miles. So to put that into perspective, Lake Michigan from east to west is about 70 miles, and then north to south is 250 miles. So that's potentially twice the surface area. How deep could this thing have been? This is the Gates of Lodore down at the south end of that, and it's just this gnarly steep canyon for 15 miles where the river flows through here. So that rim up above, you see that is about 400 or 500 feet tall, right? That is right here on the southern rim of that lake. And these are the shorter mountains. To the left are the Uintas, which are much taller. This is looking south to where the Gates of Lodore are there. And you're standing in that dried out lake bed. They just call it an alluvial plain, but it's a lake bed. And that crack couldn't have been there when this thing was full of water, right? Now, I've been out here. This isn't my footage. This is Google Earth. I was looking for Forrest Finn's treasure, and I saw a clue that was out here, and it was seriously like 8 hours. Part of the road is paved, part of it was dirt road, but it's just this huge dried out lake bed. So as far as you can see here is just a couple miles, probably about that much right there. Okay, now let's start zooming out across this thing. If this was all full of water, I mean, hands down the largest inland body of water. And according to this report and having seen the dried out lake bed with my own 2 eyes, it was full of water. But according to the experts, this was during the Cenozoic and Cretaceous periods millions and millions of years ago. If this dried out millions of years ago, why is it on maps from the 16th and 17th centuries? Now let's take a trip downstream to the south of the Gates of Lodore. And this is some of the gnarliest eroded landscape you're going to find anywhere in the world. Just to the left of Moab is Arches National Park. To the right is Canyonlands, which I'll show you some of these in a minute. Anytime you see monument, that just means a big, huge spire that wasn't eroded away. This is hundreds of miles of biblical level looking destruction everywhere. And then you get down to the Grand Canyon. So starting back up in the north, right next to Moab, you have Arches National Park. I'm sure you've seen these. There's hundreds of them. They say that this is all formed by wind erosion, but it literally sits right across the highway from where you start into Canyonlands National Park, which was definitely carved out by water. But these are all concentrated in a relatively small area here, and I think it had to do with like eddy currents. Now, it seems like every other natural bridge or arch is carved out by water. Like this one has that stream running down through there, which there's probably thousands of those. And then next to the ocean, you got another 1,000-something arches. I lived next to a natural bridge that was carved out by an underground river, and then it collapsed on each side of it. But then just to the west and to the south is Canyonlands, and this was obviously carved out by water. And here's what I see out of this landscape, and I've been all over it. When you're standing there, all of the plateaus are at the same level, or thereabouts, just kind of like gently rolling hills. And it's like this for a couple 100 miles in each direction. So then something happened that carved it out down to this level. If you were to stand down here and sight across that, you would see the same level of ground with a bunch of canyons carved down below that. Well, that is a microcosm of what we're seeing up here. You sight across this, it was obviously all at the same level at one time. You stand up where we're standing and sight across, and that was all obviously at the same level at one time. So if that lake did collapse and carve all this out, then the initial flood came through and carved everything down to the lower level there. And then as the lake emptied, it formed smaller rivers that started cutting everything down to this level where the current river is. And this is a lazy river. It's not charging down through there, constantly eroding away. It's probably at the same level as when the first Europeans got there. But now here you are down at that lower level, and you see it's flat all the way across here. Up where we were was up here. Now, this secondary canyon level that we're looking down into right now is only in the places where the rivers are. But this level we're standing on now continues a couple 100 miles in each direction, which makes up the majority of the landscape. But you have all of these monuments and spires up at that highest level that I was talking about that haven't washed away. So around all of the edges of the lower valley, they kind of form a canyon rim. You can't even get up to the top of most of these unless you're a good climber. And then out in the middle of the secondary valley floor, you'll have these scattered just straight spires sticking up. So I view these as islands as the water was rushing by at one point. And there may have been something heavy sitting there compacting the soil underneath, because you can see how when you have a balanced rock, everything's washed out around it. So if you went out and put a foot of dirt in the gutter and put a rock on the top of it, and then it rains and the water comes by and washes away all the loose dirt, you're going to wind up with this formation here with the rock standing on top of it. That excess weight is holding the dirt in place. And then you continue down to the south and you've got the Grand Canyon, and the bottom of it is again the secondary layer down. And it's pretty obvious that all of this used to be just relatively flat rolling hills all the way across here, and it all got carved out in between. Everybody's seen the Grand Canyon, so I'm moving on. To the east of that is Petrified Trees National Forest. If you understand how petrification works, then you know this didn't happen right here in this dry desert. A tree can't petrify without water because it needs the minerals to be dissolved and seep in and replace all the cellulose. So I don't know, these could have been at the bottom of that lake and then got deposited over here. But they didn't grow here, nor were they petrified under present conditions here. So that was all going down to the south of this. Now, the big tinfoil hat part of this is, could this entire mountain have collapsed to the west? Just an absolute liquefaction of the entire mountain range, and everything shifted to the west, filling in the Red Sea, the Strait of California that's on those maps. And to me, it does kind of look like all of that just flowed down into place. And then you've got some backwash up into the north. And, you know, for that matter, it looks the same to the east. Now, I don't think any normal earthquake as we understand them could cause anything like that. It would require an enormous amount of energy to get that much land mass moving. But I do think an impact event could do that, just like a bullet hitting ballistics gel in that wobble, that jello wobble. And I just noticed this. This is the Black Hills right here. And it looks like that could have been connected to the old rim of the lake right here and just flowed out to where it sits today. Where I've got the pin is the Black Canyon, just for a little geological reference point, has a lot of this black stone. Well, they don't call it the Black Hills for nothing. You've got all of these huge black stone formations there. So it would appear that the Black Hills sitting over there by themselves were once part of this same mountain range here. So could a whole mountain range fall over like that? Well, there's a layer all around the world known as the KT boundary, or sometimes KPG. And it's where the world got annihilated at one point in the past. It's full of iridium, which is indicative of an impact event. It's also full of microspherules, which are tiny melted pieces of glass, basically, from melted sand, and something has to be really hot to melt the sand. And it's a small coal seam from all of the organic matter that was there. This is found all around the world, anywhere that the earth is trenched out deep enough to get down to it. But look at it right here. This used to be straight up. So by some means, mountains can get twisted and turned over. There's a crazy looking rock outside of Durango that looks like Van Gogh's Starry Nights, just all twisted up. So theoretically, it is possible that something can happen that makes mountains fall over. And according to old mythologies, some of these mountains just sprang up in a matter of days. So anyway, I think that lake was there at one point. Now, I think the cartographers of, 16th, 17th century could have been working off of older source maps. They say that nobody knew about America. Well, maybe they did. Maybe back during ancient times they knew about it, and they knew about California as an island. I can show you all around the Mediterranean where some cities are half underwater. There's a port that is now 7 miles away from the ocean, however that works. Roman roads that are now underwater. So, some landscapes have changed drastically since the time of the ancients. But here's the deal, is that 1671 book claims that somebody actually took a trip up the Great North River and went to the town that was all around Lake Kabus. I may have to do a video on that, but that would mean that it was still there around the 1500s probably when that took place. And, it's cool to theorize the big gnarly destruction, but it could have just dried up too. But it was there at some point, and I don't think it was during the Cenozoic. And it's kind of funny when you walk through the Grand Canyon, they've got little signs up saying that now at this level, you're at 50,000 years ago. And then you go a little further. Now at this level, you're at 1,000,000 years ago. And then 100 million years ago. And I'm just sitting here going, so you're telling me this has been a desert for 100 million years and nothing has changed? Nope. Fast rivers make steep ravines. And these are all slow, lazy rivers today. Anyway, that's the story of Lake Kabus. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll catch you on the next one. Static out.